everyone. This is Desiree Linden. I'm here with Kara Goucher. We've been teasing this project for months. It does not yet have a name, so that's going to be plugged in afterwards. And I think what's really interesting is we don't really know each other that well. So we're going to take some time today and learn about each other and find out if there is synergy for a podcast and let you guys listen in. So welcome, Kara Goucher. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for putting this thing together. Let's get to know each other.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I feel like when you bought the podcast equipment, I was like, oh gosh, we're doing this. So then I had to go buy it. I've been super excited about this. Like, we met in Boulder and hopefully people will like it, but we just want to like jam about stuff that we want to talk about. And yeah, today we really wanted to just get to know each other better and let everybody else get to know us better. So I'm super excited though that we're finally, I can see you. We have our fancy microphones and our fancy headphones and we are ready to go.
Yeah, we're definitely kitted out. And I guess I should fill people in. We've probably talked to each other for more than like 5-minute encounters. This will be like the third time. So
yeah,
we're really going back to the roots here. And I think a lot of people will know a lot of this about us already through other podcasts or things that we've had out in the running space for years prior. But for me, it's a chance to throw questions at you. Tons of things I would love to learn about you. And the two interactions we've had, it's been, we kind of just skipped over the small talk intro stuff. And we're like, okay, what do you really think about this? And so we get to bring it back here today. And, I think we should start from the beginning, which is the beginning of our running journey. And I'd love to just kind of hear how you got into the sport, how you found running, or did running find you? Just tell me about that introduction to running.
Yeah. So I was born in New York, but I moved to northern Minnesota when I was 4 years old. And I actually moved in with my grandparents when I first moved in. And my grandpa was a lifelong runner, but he wasn't a racer, right? So those are like two kind of different people. And when I was 6, he took me to a mile race, and it felt really special to me because he only took me and he only asked me to do it. And so that's how I was sort of introduced to running. But like most of us, I was played soccer, I played softball, I played tennis, I was a competitive dancer into high school. So there was all of these other things that I was also doing. And then in middle school, that's when I realized like, oh, this could be like a sport, like you can join a team, I was actually trying to get this award at my middle school, and you had to have athletics, academics, and arts. And I had played the French horn, so I was like good there and I had my grades, but I needed something athletic because everything I did was outside of school. And so all they had was volleyball or cross country. And I went to the volleyball tryout and realized there was no way in hell I was going to make that team, and joined the cross country team. And I loved it so much, Des. Like, I just couldn't believe it. Like, this was a sport. This was a thing you could do. And after that little short season in Minnesota, because of lack of funding, you can start participating in high school sports in 7th grade. And so after that little season, Dick Skog, the high school coach, asked me if I would come out for the high school track team. And I did. So it was like me and this little gang girl group. We would finish up middle school and then walk down the hill to the high school. And so I had the same coach for 6 years. And yeah, that's how I got into it. But again, I was still playing soccer. I was still a competitive dancer at that point. I was still doing a lot of other things. But what about you? How did you find running?
Let's see. I do speeches a lot, and I love to tell the story because I think everyone thinks it's like this moment where you fall in love with it and you realize you're really good at it. I was introduced to running with my parents as probably New Year's resolution type thing. We're going to go out to the track, we're going to get in shape, or we're going to run laps. And we drove out there, and my dad's like, all right, I'm going to do some laps. You want to run with me? And I'm like, sorry, you're just going to like, I don't break it down for me, Dad. And he's like, we're just going to go around the track. And like, and then what? Like, what's the goal? What do we try? He's like, we're just doing laps. I'm like, that sounds so boring. No, I'm good. My mom's like, well, I'm going to walk. Do you want to walk with me? And she's like, so the same thing, but slower. Like, I'm going to pass. And then they were like, hang out with your sister, don't get in trouble. And I looked over and she was like choreographing a dance to Madonna's Like a Virgin. She was probably like 7 or 8, so totally inappropriate. And I'm like, I'm just gonna sit by myself and wonder about, like, is this my real family? So that was my first introduction to the act of running and like trying to understand that. And I was going to ask you this as well. Like, I think running as an activity versus running a sport are so different. I later got into track and field, and I was like, oh, you can win, you can set PRs. Like, my parents were just doing it all wrong, and I loved that. Like, I was like, track and field is for me. I can like beat people and get medals and stuff. And that came around in middle school after playing softball and realizing it was quite boring. So that was my first introduction to the activity, which for a long time I just could not appreciate because it seemed hamster wheel esque. And then I got to the sport and was like, oh, this is my place.
Yeah, I did like the act of running. I grew up in a really competitive athletic family. My mom was remarried for most of my childhood to someone who had 3 children, and everyone played hockey and tennis, and it was all really, really competitive. And when I would ski race, or I ski raced throughout high school as well, any of the other sports would have to think about, like, I'm planting my pole now, I'm pushing my toe off now. I have to change the grip on my racket now. It's a backhand. Make sure you change the grip. Like, I had to always be thinking. And running was the first time I didn't have to think. It was just like I could just be mindless. And I mean, you should have seen me race in high school. I would go so hard. And then I would be like completely anaerobic and like just like staggering in. And that was something I didn't learn. I didn't learn about pacing until I went to college. But I just love that feeling of like riding that line. And of course, when you have success, it feels more fun too, right? Like, I started to win a lot of stuff. And I think my sophomore year, I qualified for Foot Locker. And that was like mind blowing to me. Like, you're going to get on an airplane and you're going to fly to I remember I got to my hotel room and I met my roommate and I said, well, who are the other 2 girls? And she was like, we're not sharing beds. Like, but that's what I did, right? Like, we went to the state meet and we
Totally.
would put 4 or 5 or even 6 girls in one hotel room. So that's when it really opened my eyes of just like, oh, this could take you somewhere. But I always just really, I loved being good for sure, but I did really love the friendships and the team and that feeling in my chest of like, oh, I think I'm going to go over the edge, but I liked it.
Yeah.
Did you have that at all?
I mean, racing for sure. That was it. Like, training to me was it always felt like a chore. And I think like in soccer, you're playing the game and you're getting fit, and then you would see results on the track because you don't equate the game of soccer to training, but you're obviously getting fitness from that. I did want to ask you, like, what was the high end of the sport that you saw for yourself? Like, did you, as a high schooler, think I'm going to go professional one day? Like, did you have heroes in the sport that looked like this is the high end, this is where I want to go, this is like the goal? Or was it just,
Yeah.
I'm really good at this, this is fun?
Yeah. Looked up to Lynn Jennings so much so that my coach wrote a fake letter from her my senior year.
That's kind of
And
messed
so
up.
it's super messed up. Like, we got this letter from Lynn Jennings. She had heard about this team in Duluth, Minnesota, and she was so impressed. And I mean, looking back, like, how dumb were we that we really thought like Lynn Jennings, of all the high schools in America, she was paying attention to ours. But I didn't know that it could be like a profession. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I knew that you could go to the Olympics and the World Championships and World Cross Country. And so I definitely wanted to do all of that stuff. And so I think for me, why puberty was so hard was because all of a sudden I thought like none of the, like, that just wasn't realistic. Like, I was crazy to have thought that I could ever get there. Like, I went through puberty, got my period halfway through my junior year, and I grew so much and I had this new body and I was like, what the hell is this? And it didn't feel right anymore. Like, I didn't feel connected to it. And I really struggled my last year of high school, and really all those dreams that I had had after watching the 1992, to age myself, 92 Olympic Games, like, it kind of faded after that. But were you aware? Were you aware of like the Olympics and World Cross Country and things like that?
No. You said world championships, and I was like, those would have never registered for me. Olympics, 100%. Michael Johnson, the golden shoes, the double, like that was the epitome of cool
Right.
for me, which is kind of funny because it's a sprint event. But I was on a track team in middle school with Monique Henderson, who was named to an Olympic relay team as a high schooler, and she was my teammate. So it was like, oh, of course, this is something that I could eventually do one day. Like this person that I'm on the same track team with can do it, and we're both winning races. So that was like my connection. But beyond that, wasn't like world championships, and I never really thought about cross country. Like the biggest thing I was aware of was Foot Locker, and then for me, soccer was it. It was World Cup. Like if you could play on a World Cup team, that would be like the height of the sport. But I also knew that there was like professional sports for women. There was a level that you could get to that was like worth striving for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But see, I love this because I was like, I literally had Carl Lewis, Jackie Joyner Kersey, Flojo. My sister is a sports nut. And like by the time she was 8, she had a subscription to Sports Illustrated. So anytime there was anything running related, she'd like slip it under my door. And I had them all up. And so it's crazy to me that like I was hardcore, like this is what I want to do, even though I was still playing soccer and still doing dance competitions. And you were a little bit more like, I want to be fast. But in the end, we both ended up like making 2 Olympic teams. And it's crazy. But when you went out for track, did you immediately know you were good at the longer events or did you start off as a sprinter?
I was sane enough to not know, like to know that I was not a sprinter. So I had Monique Henderson for comparison. And occasionally, if someone were sick on the team, I would have to run the 4x1. And that was like my nightmare. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw it up for an entire team. Like, but Monique was anchor. So it was like, just don't drop the baton. It's fascinating to learn that whole event and try to do something at that pace. So I knew I wasn't a sprinter, but I loved the 800 meters. And I resisted leaving the 1500 meters really in my heart all the way through like my freshman year of college. It was not the event for me. But anytime someone was like, oh, you're eventually going to be a 10K runner, you're eventually going to be a marathoner, I was like, absolutely not. That's like, that's what my parents were doing on the track when they're running around like hamsters on a wheel. Like that's way too much time on the track. It's way too much running. So like I just always felt like to compete, you had to be at the shortest event possible and like really like 800-meter burn where you're just like, oh my God, I might not finish like this last 100 meters. I could fall on the track and die. That was like track for me.
That's so interesting because I hate the 800. It just hurts the whole time.
It's the worst for sure. But I think there's something about like, like in my mind, there was always something about it has to be absolutely miserable for it to be real sport.
Yeah,
Like just like
there
keeping your
has to be
hand,
suffering.
yeah, in the fire for as long as possible. And like, but I just want to do this for like under 2 minutes if possible.
So, did you know about other kids in the country? Like you mentioned, you knew Foot Locker. Did you know like what other athletes were doing, or were you really just like focused in on your own development?
I was pretty aware, and this is actually hilarious, but like obviously the internet was starting to become a thing around then. So that helped some. I think in state, I really knew like my freshman year, I was runner up at the cross country meet in California in Division 2 or 3, maybe. And no female had won 4 state meets in a row. Like that was unheard of. So it was so close to like maybe being like having that chance. And then in the same year, a freshman female won the first time ever. It was Sarah Hall, then Sarah Bay.
Oh,
And so I was like, oh, like this is the competition. And then you started putting together, little things here and there. And I was absolutely aware of Foot Locker, that being like the big goal, which is funny. You had one of the questions down. I'm jumping way ahead. So we'll go back to it. Never mind. I'm sorry.
okay. Well, who else? So this is what I love. Like you just mentioned Sarah Bay, Sarah Hall, and Monique. Who else were you running with at that time that continued on? Anyone?
Alicia Shea, Alicia Craig. Like the 2001 high school class was pretty absurd. A ton of women that I could rattle off names, but they're all failing me right now. And then I was kind of unfortunate, but the men's side was just that was it. It was Ryan Hall, Dathan, and Alan Webb. So that was the 2001 class that kind of had most of the attention in the running world. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm before you, so we didn't even have internet. I do remember my stepdad would get USA Today during the track season. And I don't remember what day it was, but he would get it and it would list all the like top 3 times in the country. And it made me feel really small. Like these times were so much faster than what I was running. And so it was eye opening just how hard other kids were working, but also in a weird way, I was like, well, I wish I didn't know that because I'm like happy in my own little world. And now I know that, you know, I would get beat by a minute in a 3,200. That doesn't make me feel so happy. But yeah, I kind of liked that I didn't have that comparison. I think I would have really struggled with that if that's how it had been when we were younger, when I was younger, if I would have been able to have access to everybody else and all their results, and that would not have been good for me.
When did that shift though? Because obviously you get to the Foot Locker Nationals, you start competing against everyone that's the best, and then you're recruited, and then you go to college, and now you're super exposed to all that. When did you mentally go like, okay, this is a much bigger pond that I'm swimming in here? How do I adapt? And like, was that a struggle, or were you just like, okay, adapt or die?
No, it was a struggle, I'd say. My sophomore year was the first time I ran Foot Locker. First time I didn't know about it my freshman year. And actually, I went to attack the athletic congress. They had like a national championship. And so I won the freshman race. And the woman who got second, Jenny Zaire, ended up being my college teammate and roommate, which is like hilarious. And then after that, actually, Carrie Tollefson's dad told my parents about Foot Locker because she went, she might have gone all 4 years. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But so my sophomore year, I tried out for that and made it. And like I said, my mind was blown. Like people were wearing real running clothes. They had like watches that they were like starting and stopping. Like I just wore a Swatch watch and look what time we started and look when we ended. So that really was like the beginning of like, whoa, this is big. Like the race was shown on ESPN, I think. My sophomore year, or my junior year, I made it again and I ran faster, but I got a worse place. And so that was like another interesting lesson. Like I improved by 30 seconds, but the entire country did too. And then my senior year, I didn't even come close to making it, not even remotely close. I ended up dropping out because I was so far back. And so when I went off to college, like I had always thought I would go to Stanford and I would win a national title. And then, like, Stanford wasn't interested because I wasn't running well. And so I went on these visits and I wasn't really happy with anything. And then I went to Iowa State was hosting the NCAA cross country championships. And my mom and stepdad drove me down there so I could see it my senior year. And I just remember this team, Colorado. They had like no superstars, but they got second. So I had already done all 5 of my college visits. And this is back in the day too. Like I would call and leave messages on answering machines. I didn't have email or anything like that, right? So I would like call and like give this pitch. My name is Kara Wheeler and I used to be really good and I'm not very good anymore, but I know I could help your team. I was like memorized. So anyway, I ended up going out to Colorado and had to pay for it myself, but was like, okay, this is where I want to be. I feel like I could make a difference here. I feel like I could help this team. And at that point, I had really let go of those big individual dreams. It really wasn't until I was halfway through college that I started thinking big again. What was so I'm curious, like you're running the mile, the 800. How did that progress throughout high school and how being a competitive soccer player and loving it, how did you go from that to wanting to run in college?
Yeah, it was a process. I mean, I think it was like this is the natural path. This is the best thing for your body because I'm 5'1", 98 pounds soaking wet. So soccer was never going to be for me. I loved it. It was fun. But it was always like survival on the field was being the fastest on the field. That's how I got through games. So it was this common sense, like you're actually pretty good at running and you have a future in this, and you should probably try and stay healthy and not get just destroyed on the soccer field. So I played soccer all 4 years in high school, and then in California you can do cross soccer track. And then eventually was like, okay, I need to like just preserve my body this last season and then mentally shift to um, track and field. So that was kind of how it happened. And um, I don't know. I never really thought that I would go up to the longer distances. It was just like that once you get in college and you see how good everyone else is, you start going the longer distances and cross. Like, um, again, it's that new pool of talent where you're like, I'm actually not very good at the 1500 meters. I like it. It's fun. But I spent a lot of time resisting what others said I could do, just trying to figure it out myself. And part of the thing was in high school, I was super jealous when you said the intro. You had 6 years of the same high school coach. I had 4 years in high school with four different coaches. So that was always like, okay, like I can just work my way into the 800, 1500 meter again because coach isn't going to push back and tell me what to do. By my junior year, I had a coach that I really connected with, Frank Brown. We're still friends today. And, he's the person who actually like made me start believing that I could be good on the track. And he was probably the first person who mentioned the word marathon to me. And I was like, that's so far down the line, man. I don't like, it's just like whatever. I don't know what he's talking about, but it was interesting in looking back at it. He had sort of this long-term vision, and you have these one-off 1-year coaches and they don't think that way. So I think that was a large part of like what helped me get to ASU and mentally open my mind up to like going to the longer distances. So I was fortunate to have one pretty solid coach in the batch of four my high school years.
So when you got to college and you realized what a big pond it is, was that intimidating to you? Or were you like, I'm still going to get there. I'm still going to be good?
It was a mix. I mean, I think similar to Colorado and what you saw there, it was like we didn't have any superstars on our team. Like we did then because they had been developed. And that was one reason my high school coach really pushed me to ASU. I looked at all the big schools. I could have been like 15th woman on the Stanford team and never traveled to anything, not been a professional runner, and had a really great degree, maybe, and assuming I finished school. But I wasn't going to maximize my ability there or ever probably make a team. So ASU to me was like I can be with this group where the coach just develops athletes and you see them progress and get better, and then start to have like we started to see people go professionally and like have longer careers. Around the time I was getting there, it was like Brandon Strong, Kelly McDonald, Lisa Aguilera. So like you were starting to see that. So yeah, I mean, I think to a degree it was intimidating, but at the same time, it was like a lot of the athletes that my coach had developed were really about where I was when they got to college. So I think it made me very aware of patience. Like if you're patient and you put in the work, like it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but it can happen eventually. You just have to like believe in the system and think about this long term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Wait, all those women, Lisa and Kelly, went to the same college you went to?
Yep, both of them. Brianna Torres was there.
Yes.
She ended up going to CU.
Yep.
And who else do we
That's
have?
a heck of a group of women that like when I first went professional, those were the women that I was racing against a lot. I mean, a couple of them veered more towards the steeple, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just crazy to me. It's such a small world.
Oh yeah, I mean I think it's so funny. Just you have the group of Footlocker kids who like all know each other, and that's like kind of the you know all eyes on these guys. And then in the first couple of years of college, it starts to expand, and you start to see these new people kind of fill in. But most of them make it to the pros at some point, and they're just names that have accomplished so much. And it starts when you're pretty young, but then it just like you get this momentum. And again, you like lift other people up in that college development time period. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my college was a little different. Like I went in dinged up. I still wasn't used to like my body yet. Um, but I always had this like little bit of psycho. Like my freshman year, I made the varsity cross country team and I scored maybe once or twice, but mostly I was sixth or seventh woman on the team. And we got third at NCAA's that year. And I want to say Carrie Tollefson won or was really far up. Maybe she won the next year. But I just remember like I went home for Thanksgiving and oh, that's the point. I had gotten like 158th and back then they only took like 180 or something like that. Now the fields are bigger.
yeah.
And my sister tells me the story that we're just hanging out and I was like, "Well, I'm going to win it when I'm a senior." And she was like, "Oh, okay. I mean, like you're pretty far back, you know." But I just kind of clawed my way up. The next year I was 60 something, I think. The next year I was injured and then I was ninth and then I did win. And so I always had like that little bit of crazy of like, even though I felt like, oh man, maybe those dreams are too big, I never fully let them die. But I think
Where
you have to have crazy.
where do you think that came from? I mean, like I love it. I think that's so great. It reminds me of Amy Hastings, who was my teammate, who like every race, her MO was just go out as hard as she could, be tucked right on the leaders, and then she would hang as long as she could, and then she would blow up and she would do it again the next week. Like it was just like, and then every week she got a little closer and a little closer. And then pretty soon, like by her senior year, she was winning the national championship indoors and she's this rock star runner. But like, I agree, you do have to have a little bit of crazy or maybe a lot to just like keep believing after you have these massive disappointments. Like where do you think that comes from? Like why do you think that stuck with you and like what made you say something like that?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm not like super cocky in my normal life. I'm always like, "Oh, can you help me with this? Could you do that for me?" you know. But I don't know. Like, I always just was like, "I know I'm supposed to do this." And you mentioned patience earlier. I actually think that that was one of my greatest assets as an athlete, is that I could say like, "Okay, this isn't going to happen now. It's probably going to happen in like 3 years." But I always like say to myself, like, "You'll have your time in the sun. You'll have your time in the sun." And I also really, really bought into Mark Wetmore and his training philosophy. And I really bought into you don't become a success overnight. You know, Adam Goucher is like the only person who just stepped out his freshman year besides Bob Kennedy and like did something like that. Everybody else like had to take their time and work their way. And so even though I was, 60 something at the NCAA cross country meet my sophomore year, I was like, hey, I improved almost 100 spots. Like that's pretty good. Like kind of trying to focus on the good in it. And sometimes I was like, it was almost like a curse sometimes that I thought I would deserve. Like I really believed I would go to the Olympics someday. And sometimes that was kind of a curse because I was like, I can't even finish this run. Like, just like, why can't that dream just go away? But it just never would. So I don't know. I just guess I would like just a little bit psycho on the whole Olympic idea. And it just stuck with me throughout my entire career.
I think we always paint that like in a unique way that doesn't sound, I mean, that does sound crazy when you say I'm a little psycho, but like everyone has that. Like I think everyone who's achieved like an Olympic team or won a national championship or anything worth mentioning, like they have that picture in their mind. And I just remember for years, and no one would have believed this. They would have been like, "You're crazy," but like that image of the flag going on my shoulders after I made an Olympic team. And it was like, this is in my mind's eye. And like, I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I know what it feels like. I can like, it's so vivid. How do I make it happen? And of course it's going to happen. When's it going to happen? I don't know. But like, I'm not going to give it up because it just seems too real. And I think you just like, it seems like everyone who's achieved at that level has been brave enough to have that vision and not let it go, which is to put your heart on the line and know that it might break a few times in the process, but you like keep trying and you're going to make it happen. Not to
Yeah.
say that it does, right? Like, I think that's one thing in sport. People think like you put in the work, you get the result, but there's no justice. It's not a
No.
justice system.
No, or we would both be 3-time Olympians.
Exactly. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you have to want it. I mean, I had teammates that I thought were like even more psycho than I was. You know, I'd be like, what are you talking about? You're going to go do this and that. But I think you got to want it. You know, like even after I graduated from college, I spent 3 years completely injured for a lot of reasons. I definitely had some eating issues towards the end of college. And I think it was sort of payback. Like, you can't do that forever. And my body was like, fuck you, basically, you know? Um, and so for a lot of reasons, I was injured for like 3 years. And even during that time, like I had gotten a postgraduate graduate scholarship, and I'd be like on the elliptical machine being like, what am I doing? You know, like I could be somebody. I could like become a doctorate and I could do all these amazing things. But instead I'm sleeping in and then going on my elliptical machine for 2 hours or whatever, you know? But the thing was, anytime I thought about quitting and being like, I can't do this anymore, I would feel this pang of regret, like so strong. And honestly, that's what kept me in it. And all those rough years was like, I couldn't live with that feeling. I had to know that I had done everything possible before I could walk away from it.
100%. What was the going professional process like for you? Like, were you courted by a bunch? I mean, it's like kind of college 2.0. Were you courted by a bunch of brands, or were you like out hustling, Kara Goucher cold calling? Hi, this is
Yeah.
Kara Wheeler. I don't think I can add much to your company, but that's
Yes.
that.
That it was Kara Gerges Wheeler because I decided to go by my legal last name. But it was similar, honestly, because I, just like in high school, was really good sophomore, junior, and struggled my senior year. And college was very similar. I did win the NCAA cross country title my senior year, but the indoor season I missed because I had a pretty severe kneecap injury. And then the outdoor season, I was just struggling. I don't know if you've ever dealt with this. We can get into this too, but I had so much race anxiety of like, oh my God, everyone's looking. So just like when I was coming out of high school and all these people stopped recruiting me, just stopped calling, it was very similar when I left college. No one wanted to be my agent, anything like that. And you want to know how I got a contract? Mark Wetmore drew one up, what he thought was fair, and we sent it to Nike, Adidas, and Fila because Adam was running for Fila at the
Mhm.
time. And when Nike said, we'll do it, we were like, okay.
Sweet.
And that's how it happened. And I didn't have like an agent to get me into races. And this is really crazy too. But eventually, I was married to Adam eventually, right? So if I got into races because Adam would race, and it would be like the concession, okay, we'll take your wife if he comes. So yeah, it was a very bumpy experience for me. Like just as high school to college was super bumpy for me, so was college to professional. I really struggled to get my footing, to understand what it meant to be a full-time athlete, to this I'm interested in if you've had to go through this too, but learning the difference between like a little niggle, something that's there, and something that's like bad, right? Because I think we all are like, I can tough through this. It's no big deal. And then I would get like a femoral stress fracture. And if I had just listened, all the signs were there. So it's tough for me. Did you ever experiencing like did you have to learn those things like the difference between good soreness and bad soreness? How was your transition? Was it fluid? Did you know where you wanted to go right away? How did that all work out for you?
Yeah, my process was pretty easy because no one was going to offer me anything. So the person who was offering me, so like, yeah, yes, I'll go. I'll be there. Do you need me to work at your stores for free? Uh, yeah, no, that part was quite easy because there was not many options, but it worked out really well. My college coach for 3 of the 4 years was Walt Drenth, and he's a Michigan guy. He's from this area. So he knew Kevin and Keith Hansen and was like, this is a good fit. And actually, they're very strength oriented coaches. So the training made a lot of sense. And truthfully, it was like, as a collegiate athlete, I was very much a student athlete. And I I took off. Coming from a soccer background, I didn't train. I never trained full time, and I never really learned like that distance running was a year round sport. It was like, well, we're on downtime, and then indoor starts in January, so I'll start back up in January. So I always knew there was room to get better when I saw people like actually being full-time year-round distance runners. Like, oh, okay, like eventually I'll do that. So I felt like that was going to make an immediate impact. I also felt like by deciding to go pro in a setup where it was, sink or swim, like if you are good enough, you'll make money. If not, you're going to lose money, basically, like moving out to Michigan and like just delaying adulthood essentially, which is what I'm still doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it made me buckle down and just like change my whole mindset. So it was really good for me from that perspective. I don't remember the second part of the question, but that was my transition into being pro.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was asking you about injury, but I'm less interested in that. Although you can tell me if you had to learn like what the boundaries were with your body. But what do you think that the Hansons saw in you? I mean, obviously you end up becoming the most consistent American marathoner ever. But what did they see in you? What do you think they saw in you where they were like, yeah, we're going to take a chance on this girl?
I think it was that they knew Walt. I think they were a little bit shocked that I was pretty persistent because they basically like they call it like negatively recruited me. They're like, you don't want to come here because it's cold. Like our mission, like our winters are tough. You're from Arizona. Like we do a lot of mileage and like basically all the bad things about being there. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's cool. I really just I want to give it a shot. And like they're like, oh, like this is we're gonna find out real quick, right? I think it was like no loss in that way. It was like she's either gonna come and adapt or she's gonna be gone in 6 months because she just said that to placate us or whatever it is. And so I think that was part of it. It was just like it's gonna be easy to find out. Like it won't no skin off our back if this doesn't work. Um, and the Walt Drenth connection, I think, which also is kind of funny. Is the story is that he was like, I don't know how serious she is about running. I'm not sure she's like great fit to go like be a professional, but she's talented enough. Like she like did a decent job. Like my first 5K ever, I was like 16, 15. So like technically she should have gotten better than that, but she never did. So like raw talent, like to a degree, there's some of it. And then I think the word marathon was always kind of tossed around behind my back. Like maybe in the marathon she'll have, what it takes. And so I think it was all like, let's just find out. But I guess if you asked anyone else, maybe they have a different perspective. But I'm just kind of like, I think that everyone was rooting against me and just wanted to see if I could prove them wrong. But that's just kind of how I'm wired. I feel like every scenario I see that, I'm like, no, I'm going to prove them wrong. So
It was almost like the perfect situation for you because you were like, I can take this weather. I can take all this stuff. You guys don't know who I am, right?
oh, 100% right. It was set up to be like, okay, prove me wrong. And I'm like, I love doing this. This is what I thrive on. And we didn't really know it at the time, but it was in that respect a great match.
And what was your progress like? What year did you join Hansons?
The fall of 2005. Yeah.
Okay. So was your first marathon the '08 Olympic trials?
2007 Boston, the nor'easter
Okay.
year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that great. So
Yeah.
in those 2 years, like it's fascinating to me that you were like, I don't want to run the marathon. And then you did like pretty close to when you went pro. Like I was resisted it as long as I possibly could because I grew up in Duluth where Grandma's Marathon is, which is the greatest marathon in the world, just so everyone knows. However, I saw friends and coaches like hobbling around afterwards or like pee down their legs or barfing. And I was like, who would do that? That looks awful. I'm never going to do that. I'm just going to stay on the track. I'm a good 1500 5K person. Yeah, it took me a lot longer to be convinced that that would be a good event for me. So, how did they get you to buy in just 2 short years?
Yeah, it was the same thing where I resisted and I was like, I'm a 10K runner, like maybe I'll try the half marathon. And then Olympic trials are kind of that's the thing. If you qualify, you do that and that like justifies the time spent in the sport if you're not actually making money, which was my situation. So I didn't track was not looking like it was going to pan out to get one of the Olympic trials spots. And I watched 3 or 4 of my teammates train and go through a segment to get ready for the Chicago Marathon. And then I actually volunteered at the marathon. I was like the gopher in the elite suite. So like if a agent wanted water bottles for his athlete, or like I had to fill up the candy bowls and like just make sure everyone in the elite suite was happy. So it was actually my introduction to a lot of people in the industry. They just didn't know it. I'm like, oh no, I've met you before. So I did that, and then on race day, it was like escorting the finishers from the finish line to like the elite hospitality tent. Um, but I got to watch my teammates do that build up and then run the race. And then at the end of it, we were all teammates before as just runners. And then at the end of it, they were marathoners. And I was like, oh, they have something I don't.
Yeah.
So it was envy. I was like, I want to have that title too. Cause not a lot of chances when you become an adult, like to get this new title, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
like something that was obtainable. And I was like, it was fun to watch them go through this process. And I personally loved that it was like this massive commitment. It was 3 months, and then you had one day, and it was one chance. Don't mess it up because you got to wait 3 months to do it again. And I liked that pressure of it. I mean, watching it, I wasn't sure if I would respond to it when I was running it, but I was like, after I watch them all finish, they become marathoners. I'm like, Kevin, will you let me do a marathon? And he's like, okay, wait a minute. First of all, I was not the one telling you can't do a marathon. Yes, let's try it. So that's, yeah, it was just jealousy and envy of teammates becoming marathoners and me just being a runner.
Yeah. I mean, however it draws you in, right? It draws everyone in a different place. For me, in 2007, after the World Championships, I started getting all these offers to go run places. I mean, like that had never, I had to pay my way into every little thing, or stay with Adam or whatever. And I got this offer to run a half marathon. And
Well, pump the
Alberta was
brakes
like,
though. For
oh,
after the World Championships, what happened at the World Championships? This is kind of significant to the office, not just like being there.
okay, okay.
Right?
Well, it was my first World Championships. I was in the 10,000. The weather was atrocious. It was super hot and humid. And, on paper, I wasn't one of the contenders at all. I really just had this one 10K from the year before where I got my mark, but I knew I was in good shape. And on the bus ride over, my coach was like, I want you to take a chance tonight. He said, if you go out and run with the leaders and blow up and finish 20th, that's where everyone expects you to finish anyway, And he was like, but you're fitter than they realize. And so anyway, I did. I kind of just put my nose in it. I mean, I was like trying to stay on the rail, trying to stay out of trouble. And honestly, like the more the laps ticked on, the more I was like, I can't believe I'm still here, and then I started to get a little bit more confidence as we went on. And then I think it was down to maybe 6 or 7 of us in a lead pack. And with about 3K to go, Dababa and Ablegese went ahead. Like it happened so quick. They were just gone. And then it was like this pack of myself, Kim Smith, Joe Pavey, and I think Dina was still there too. I could see her when I would look up at the Jumbotron. But then that kind of whittled down to 5 or to 3 of us. And then that whittled down to just Joe and myself. And as we headed into the last lap, I was like, I cannot believe I'm going to get 4th in the world. Like, this is crazy, Seriously, I was like, I hope my mom figured out how to watch this because it was over in Japan. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It was like, Joe or I, one of our lives is going to change forever tonight. And yeah, I'm running hard. I'm really tired. But you have that gut feeling like, I know I could give a little more. And so I was quick doing like calculations in my mind, like when to go. And so I decided that with 200 to go, I was going to blow by her and see if she reacted. And if she reacted, I would have just pulled back because I was happy to be 4th. But she didn't. She didn't fight me at all. And yeah, I ended up getting 3rd. And Des, I like went insane. Like I like was pushing Dababa over, jumping around. Like I couldn't believe it. Like you dream
As
about
you
these moments.
should.
Yeah. I was
As you
seriously like,
should.
they're like, who is this girl? But I was just like, I couldn't believe it. And so yeah, it was like the biggest breakthrough, obviously, of my career. It opened up so many doors. I started getting paid. I started getting into races. And, I was not that I didn't like being Adam's wife, but I was no longer Adam's wife. I was Kara. I had my own career at that point. So yeah, it was pretty life-changing. But in that, I got invited to do this half marathon. And Alberto was saying, he was my coach at the time, and he was saying, you're not ready to run a half marathon. We focused on 5K, 10K work. And then I said, okay, well, they were going to pay me $13,000. And he was like, what? No, you should go. You should go. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Just got through. You're good.
Yeah. So at the time, that was huge for me. I mean, I wasn't getting appearance fees. My contract was super small. And so I was like, okay. So I went and ran this half marathon. It was Paula Radcliffe's return from giving birth to her daughter. And my goal was just to run, Alberto didn't even come because we weren't expecting me to do anything that important. And my goal was just to run with her as long as possible, see what it was like to run against the world record holder. But that little psycho in me was listening to her breathing whenever we'd go uphill, and I'd think to myself, she's laboring. I'm gonna pick it up a little bit. And then I'd get a little gap on her and I'd think what am I doing? And I'd slow down. And then finally that voice was like, take her now. I mean, we had 5 miles to go still, But anyway, I ended up winning. I ran 66:57, which I didn't know what that meant or anything like that. But because of that, 5 weeks later, I got to ride on the press truck and watch the New York City Marathon, the women. And I was so captivated. I had never seen women work that hard for so long. I mean, I always imagined a marathon you jog a little, then you run hard for a while, then you jog a little. I mean, from the gun, they were just hammering. And Paula ended up winning.
Who was in the race? Yeah.
Yeah. Paula ended up winning, and Wami was second, and they had raced each other since they were juniors.
That's crazy.
And I just remember being I want to know if I can be that tough. Kind of like you with your teammates. I was that's the toughest thing I ever saw in my life. And it's a little bit scary, but I want to know if I can be that tough too. And so, yeah, I mean, that night I told Alberto I'm running New York next year.
The recruiting trip, it hooks a lot of people in. It's a great seat. You get to watch people just knock heads for 26.2 miles. I did the same New York one. I think it was in 2009. What year did you run New York?
08.
So it was probably 9. It was the year Meb won. Yeah. And
09.
And then, Shalane was on that one. And then the next year she debuted there. So it definitely leaves an impression on people. So you sign up for New York City Marathon. Did you do track that year? How did the training change? What did you love? What did you hate about getting ready for the marathon?
Yeah, I still focus on track in 08 because I had never made an Olympic team. And this was everything I had been working for my whole life. And so Alberto and I, loosely talked about running the marathon trials as my first marathon, but quickly decided I don't want to, we have a good thing going. I look very good to make the Olympic team in the 5K and the 10K. Let's get this dream accomplished first. And so
what trials number was that for you? How many trials did you run to that point?
It was my third trials.
Wow.
Yeah, I ran 2000 when I was in college.
Okay.
I was the youngest finalist in the 5000. I got 7th. And then in 2004, I got knocked out in the first round. I didn't make the final. So that was super fun.
That's a lot of build up for that, a lot of pressure on that.
And it was just I have to make this happen. This is all that I've been thinking about for years. So I ran the 5:10 at the trials. I was second in the 10. Second in the 10. I won the 5. And then I went to the Olympics, and at the time I got 10th in the 10,000 and 9th in the 5,000. They're both 8th now, which is just so frustrating and annoying. We'll talk about that on another podcast.
Stories there.
And so, so from my 5,000 meter final to the New York City Marathon was exactly 8 weeks. And so I came home and took a week off, and then I did a build-up week, and then I did 5 weeks at 100, which I had never done before, and then I tapered. And in a weird way, I think it was good because my personality and Alberto's is we can really over-obsess. And so the fact that we just didn't have that much time to over-obsess was good. I mean, I think that was probably aside from the Olympic trials in Houston, that was probably the best marathon I ever ran. And I do think a lot of it was I couldn't overthink it. It was just it's coming. So just jump in there, do the best you can. So yeah.
It was an incredible race. I remember I ran the 2008 trials in the marathon, and it was my second marathon. And I think at mile 22, I was 8 seconds out of third place. Or no, I was 8 seconds out of third place, and I felt like I had all the momentum in the world. And then I found the wall, and I blew up, and I finished 13th. And I was like I thought I was going to make that team. I was dead
I
set.
love
Like,
that though. See, you have the crazy too,
broke my
right?
heart. Like, yeah, it was literally like, I know exactly what this, I know what I know what I'm going to look like with the flag on my shoulders type vivid. And then it didn't happen. So I ran the track, 2008 trials, and you and Amy Bagley and Shalane all lapped me. Um, so that was fun, but it was really cool to be in a trials at that point. I thought that just like experience wise and being a part of that race was phenomenal. Um, and then I remember watching your 2008 debut in New York and being like, "Ah, shit, it's going to be so much harder to make the team in 2012." It's like she's going to move up for sure. Shalane's going to end up moving up. Like, you start thinking about the missed opportunity of 2008, and then it was like, I have to, like, that you just move the bar in terms of time. It was like, at the time, if you could break 2:30, you were going to make the team, and like I had run 2:32 in a hot Chicago, but it was like, oh, that this standard might not stand anymore, because she just ran 2:25 in New York, which is super hard course, in her debut. So that was for me, like, it was really cool to see someone just go in and like compete with those people, and like finish so close behind Paula, who everything, I think everyone had on a pedestal at that time. And it's like, okay, this is the bar now. So I think it was just, as a fan of the sport and as a competitor of you, it was like, well, I guess wasn't a competitor at the time. We were just, you were competitive and I was trying to be competitive.
Well,
Um,
that switched.
but it was like, this is, this, it, I have to be that much better if I want to make the team, if I want to really mix it up with these guys. So I think those performances really raised the bar, it was fun to watch.
Well, shortly after that, the next year, we were on the World Championships marathon team together. And I remember I finished and literally I looked to see like who else was around, and you were like 1 second behind. And I was like, holy crap, like who is this girl? And then was spent the next year pregnant. Did you run Chicago in 2010? I remember you running a pretty fast Chicago. Was that in 2010?
Yeah, I ran 2:26 that year. So that was my PB
Yes.
time.
So when I went to Boston in 2011 after giving birth to Colt, I remember saying like I was nervous to race you because I felt like she's good. She almost sniped me at World Champs. She just ran 2:26. Like she's good. And I remember my team being like, don't worry about her. She's not, don't be worrying about her. And I was like, and then it was just, I knew who you were. I knew you were coming on. And yeah, you beat me handedly in that Boston. But one thing I'll always remember is when you passed me, you were like, keep your eyes up, keep your eyes up. I've had people pass me and like they elbow me on an open road. Like Americans, right? And so I'll never forget that. Like you didn't pass me with like I mean, maybe you were in my head. I don't know. But to me, it seems super gracious. You were like, look up, keep going forward. I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was very positive. And yeah, I just like really appreciated that. But again, I didn't really know you. I just knew that you were a marathoner like coming on.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I feel like when you're in those international races, particularly in Boston, where there was just this hunger for an American winner, it becomes a numbers game, right? Like, the more people you have there, the greater the chances of getting an American winner. And I didn't particularly know you, but it's like, well, for people are coming back 100%. That's what happens after mile 20, right? Like, that's used to be the guarantee. So it's like, if you can give someone like a little nudge to be like, let's stay positive, let's keep moving forward, and then it's a numbers game, like, our odds go up if there are more of us in the pack. So that's the in the moment logic, I believe. Um,
But
but
you know what? I have to say, like, that race is the first time I was thinking about someone else while I was racing. Like, the first thing I said when I finished was, I was like, did Des win? Like like it was just like you said, that hunger for the winner. And I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it today, but I'm so glad that it was you that finally got that win. But Boston especially, like I just wanted an American winner, right? It was just we all wanted it so bad, and we needed it to happen. And so when you went by and I could see you up ahead, like kind of charging through the crowd, and like I think there weren't that many of us, like I think I ended up getting fifth, but you were kind of moving through, and I saw you got up to the front, and that's the first time I've been in a race where I was like wondering how you did, you know. Like, I mean, I'm like still running as hard as I can. I was running as hard as I could, but I was like, I want to know. I want to know if she got it. And you came so close. I mean, just not even 2 full seconds, right?
It was about 2 seconds.
2 seconds. I mean, that's
I try not to
nothing.
think
It's
about it.
nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah.
But you know what? You did win. You did win. You were the one who finally delivered. And I had such a good feeling that year. I had no idea what the weather was going to do, but all of our best marathoners were running it on the female side. And I remember I wrote this blog and I like broke it all down, who I thought was going to do well and why. And I'll have to find that. But I did say, like, I believe that you were going to be the one because you knew the race, the course the best. You can't let emotion get in the way. You have to be, disciplined in your actions during the race. You can't let the crowd and all those feelings and the want affect you. You have to like be in the moment. Of course, when I was watching it on TV, I was like, oh shit, like this isn't what I expected. But still, you won. And I was watching it and we were like going crazy. I remember Colt wanted to send you a video. So he like recorded a video telling you good job.
That's
And
so
we
cool.
sent it to you. But yeah, it was, I don't know how we got on this, but I'm so glad that you were the one that finally broke that, not curse, but that streak where we just couldn't seem to get someone on top of the podium.
That was an incredible year. I look back at that and just to talk about how good it was and the quality of people in there. And this isn't to break your heart, but it's just to be like, it could go any way on any given day. 4 of the top 5, you being fifth, would end up winning a Boston. So it was Kalel obviously won it. Sharon Cherup won the next year. I guess I was second. I won an 18 Cherup. And then what's her name? Karen Rotish.
Yeah.
Won in, I think, 15. And then, it's like if you, and they could rotate at any time. That's just how good it is up front. And so, more numbers you get up there, the more likely it happens. But I think it was just a crazy race. And I think that, again, it was a product of like us having sort of a weird camaraderie and not like, I'm going to do what I can to break you. And I don't care about the rest of like, it was never like Americans versus Americans. It was like, we're trying to break the field.
Yeah, we're
open.
trying to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then my family like completely fell in love with you in, I had to be 2013. Was it 2013 when I ran Boston again?
Yeah.
And you and Shalane and I had committed to it, but then you had gotten injured leading into the Olympic Games. And I don't know. After that, my sister was like, if you're not going to win, I want Des to win.
Yes.
I was like, okay, anyway, you could tell me good job or anything. But that's always been fun, is like my family is really invested in you. And I don't know. It just like these things that pulled us together. Like we said at the top of this is like the third longest conversation we've ever had, but it was meant to be. Like all these things came together where we got to, be together. And then we both made the 2012 team together. And then in 2016, I finished 4th and you were the first person to come over and talk to me, like literally right after I crossed the line. And like, that's the stuff like I'll never forget. Those are the things that like really leave an imprint on you. So yeah, I'm glad that we stuck it out and now we can do fun things together.
Yeah, I honestly think it's pretty, I want to say it's pretty rare, but maybe it's not. I think that a lot of time in sport, you can be put up against each other and like become sort of this conduit for other people's agendas, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm proving my ego through the performance of my athlete or like whatever it is, like brands, coaches, agents, the whole thing. And so I think it's pretty rare to like come out of it and be like, oh, like let's share our experiences. And I really think that's what's going to be great about having this podcast is between the two of us, we've seen so much stuff in the sport. I think that's why we're able to be NBC analysts. It's why there's people are submitting names for the podcast, and hopefully they listen. And it's why we can have conversations beyond like the weather when we do get to chat. Like they go pretty deep pretty quick because I think we've had so much shared experience, and I think we're mature enough to be like, oh, we're not competitors. We can collaborate and be so much better. So I appreciate that about our connection. And hopefully it's not rare, but it sometimes it feels like it is.
Yeah, it does sometimes feel that way. I think that we both love the sport. It's taken us to places we didn't know it could take us. And I just always respect athletes that I believe in, that are training hard and that keep coming back and take, like 2012 could have ended you. 2012, you could have been like, this sucks. Like I made my Olympic team, I'm done. But you didn't. And you actually came back stronger. And so all that kind of stuff is like, that's what I love. Like that's the story, those stories of redemption that I can't get enough of, because it goes back to that patience and that belief and that like, I'm going to be here till I can't be here. And I love all that stuff. And I loved that about you. And I mean, I know you're still racing, you're still fast, but I really loved that about you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Likewise. And I guess we're running about an hour. Um, Teasers for what you want to talk about on this podcast and what's going on with you really broadly. Or you can dial it in very specifically. What's going on in Kara's world that we should tune into next episode so that we can hear the updates on?
Okay. I don't know. I have like a million tiny jobs, like most post-professional runners. My health has been a battle. I'm hoping to move forward with that in a better way so I can run a little bit more. I just took my son to a national cross country meet where he got 134th baby.
Awesome.
And I'm very excited about us working together. And I'm very excited that we both have books coming out next year. And some of the things that I would really like to talk to you about is broadcasting, the behind the scenes, because we both get feedback. And I don't think most people understand how that world works. Like the fact that we both wrote books, what was that process like? I'd love it if we could do current events, just kind of like talk about what's happening without offending anyone.
Someone's going to be offended, but we're not doing it on purpose.
We're not. No, like just talking about current events, how we feel about it. We're both really passionate about clean sports. So I think we could have some fun conversations there. I don't know. I'm excited for all of the different things that we could do, even like bringing on a guest here and there to chat with us. So I just feel like the sky's the limit. But when you look at us, I'm curious to know about like we know that you're running Boston in 2023. What else are you hoping to do, and kind of big picture, what are you looking forward to in the future?
Oh goodness. Definitely Boston. That's always fun. I need a good race. Like the training for New York went so well. Like it was so good. And so that's the thing where you like have those images on your run where you're like, this is what's going to be like to break into the podium group, and then I'm going to be battling. And then, to have the wheels fall off really early was pretty devastating. You spend a lot of time those late miles being like, what am I doing? So I'm excited to start training hard again and kind of erase that, like get back into the mentality of like, what does it look like coming through the Newton Hills? And hopefully in my mind, I'm in contention, because if I'm not, like if I'm in like 15th place, I'm not going to be on the start line. So mentally. And so that's first and foremost. Beyond that, I think I'm supposed to have an identity crisis, like I'm kind of transitioning out of the sport and like, who am I? What am I going to do next? Like, what does that look like? So I think I'm just like preparing for that. And I'm going to probably try and have that at the ultra distance so that I can really think about it and be in my own mind for a long time. And, maybe on some trails in beautiful places will help soothe that process and give me direction. So that I think will be coming up as well. I think I would love, I went to UTMB this year and it was just awesome. It was such a cool experience. I would love to run one of those races. But I went to UTMB this year and I was like, holy shit, I'm not prepared for this. Like the trails are so gnarly. So that will be, there'll be some learning there and figuring out if I'm ready and, balancing that with how Boston goes. Cause if it goes well, then who knows?
Right.
So those are semi near. And then beyond that, I guess when I get out of the identity crisis, it's like, what's next? Is it in the industry? Is it in sport? Or is it, something totally different? And I don't
Do you
actually,
feel Oh, wait, finish that
no,
thought.
I don't
You don't
actually,
actually
I don't actually have an answer for that. Like, I'm not really sure what that will be.
Yeah. Do you feel pressure? Like, I know that you're interested in trails. I apologize. I've probably hyped you for like 3 years now saying that if people really want to see a marathoner transition to that scene, it will be you. Do you feel pressure or does it feel like an adventure?
It feels like an adventure. I feel like I shouldn't have to remind people this, but I'm 39, so like, I'm not sure I'll be at my best when I get to the trails, and I might not even get there until like 40, 41. I mean, I won't get there until 40 at the minimum, but I'm gonna go and try and see what I can do and try and get better. I think for me, it just seems like a ton of fun because I'm gonna be a beginner. Like, I don't expect that like me running on the roads is gonna translate into knowing where to put my feet and like managing super long distance. Like it translates because it's running, but really it's so different. So I just feel like I'm gonna go be a beginner, and then I'm gonna figure out like what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and like try to improve. And that like is that to me sounds super fun. Like it's like I would like to learn how to play guitar too, and I kind of put them on the same page. Like, oh, it'd be kind of fun to learn this new thing.
I love it. That's how it should be. Especially like you have nothing to prove. You've accomplished everything. You've been to the very, very top of your sport. So it, yeah, I love that for you. I did feel a little pressure, but mostly just because I wasn't trying to be an elite ultramarathoner. I just wanted to do it. And the media just made it into something it didn't need to be. I was just, so we're all clear, I was never going to be an elite trail athlete. If you've seen my shuffle, Des has seen it. I barely skim. I can trip on grass. So it was never going to be elite, right? It was more of just like, I want to experience something different. So with you, it's a little different because first of all, we know you can go the distance because you are the world record holder in the 50K. But you just have a different stride, different, we're just different athletes. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to watch you and see what you can do there. It's going to be fun.
It will be. I think we have a lot of really great leadership there too. And I always mention Magdalena Louie just because she, Olympian in the marathon, and then she's just did amazing things on the trail. But yeah, I think that much like the roads, there's just people who have gone through before that have done a phenomenal job and inspired. And so it'll be fun to follow in their footsteps.
Cool. Yay. Well, should we wrap this one up?
I think so. I feel good about it. I feel good
I
about
do
it.
too. I think we did pretty good for a couple of women who are just kind of shooting the breeze. So awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back.